There's a moment that almost no one talks about. It's when you open your banking app and you don't feel that jolt of stress. You don't rush to close it. You don't immediately start doing mental math about whether a coffee today means cutting groceries tomorrow. You just look at the number, and you're fine. That shift doesn't happen at $1 million. It doesn't even require a six-figure salary. There's a much smaller number that quietly changes how you relate to money, and once you cross it, your financial behavior starts to look very different. That number is $20,000. My name is Michael, and I spend an unhealthy amount of time studying money, financial behavior, and why some people seem to move forward financially while others stay trapped in the same patterns for years. If you care about understanding how money actually works, psychologically and structurally, this channel is for you. Before we get into why $20,000 matters so much, think about how most people imagine wealth building. Some picture people who were born into money and never had to struggle. Others imagine slow, painful progress, saving a little here, investing a little there, hoping it adds up someday. Both views miss something important. Wealth doesn't grow smoothly. It doesn't move in a straight line. It moves in steps. There are specific financial thresholds that act like invisible walls. Below them, progress feels exhausting. Above them, the rules change, and $20,000 is the first serious threshold. It's the line that separates people who are likely to build real wealth from people who spend their entire lives reacting to money instead of controlling it. What's wild is that most people don't even know this line exists. Think of it like pushing a heavy object uphill. At the beginning, every inch takes effort. You're pushing hard, barely moving, wondering if it's even worth it. That's what saving feels like when you're starting from zero. But once you get enough momentum, something changes. The object starts moving on its own. And once you crest the hill, gravity does the work for you. That's what $20,000 represents. Everything before it feels like resistance. Everything after it feels like leverage. And here's the part most people get wrong. This isn't just about having more money to invest. It's not about returns or percentages yet. The real shift happens in your head. When you don't have savings, your brain operates in survival mode. Every decision is filtered through scarcity and fear. You take bad job offers because you can't afford to wait. You stay in situations you hate because leaving feels dangerous. You say yes when you want to say no because you need the cash. That mindset shapes your entire financial life. And until you cross that first threshold, it's almost impossible to escape it. This isn't just about being disciplined or responsible with money. When you're stuck in survival mode, your brain literally can't focus on growth. Opportunity doesn't register. Long-term planning feels irrelevant. Trying to build wealth in that state is like trying to plan a vacation while your house is on fire. Your entire mental bandwidth is consumed by immediate threats, rent, bills, the next paycheck. But once you cross a certain line, something changes. When you hit roughly $20,000, your brain finally gets breathing room. The internal questions shift. Instead of constantly asking, how do I make it to next month, you start asking, how do I make this money work harder? That's the transition from reactive to proactive. There's data behind this. Vanguard's research shows that having just $2,000 in emergency savings increases financial well-being by about 21%. That's it, $2,000, less than what many people spend on a short vacation or a new laptop. Why does it matter so much? Because it pulls you out of pure survival mode. Now stretch that buffer to 3 to 6 months of expenses, which for most people lands close to $20,000, and financial well-being improves even more. But the bigger shift isn't emotional, it's cognitive. Your brain stops obsessing over protection and starts thinking about growth. That's when the math finally starts to help you. Let's keep this simple. Say you're saving $1,000 a month and earning an average 8% return. Reaching your first $20,000 takes roughly 19 months.
That's a year and a half of consistency, restraint, and saying no to things other people say yes to. Most people quit before they get there. But here's what almost no one expects. Your second $20,000 doesn't take another 19 months. It takes closer to 17. Nothing changed. Same savings rate, same risk, same effort.
The only difference is that your first $20,000 is now working alongside you. That's compound growth starting to show up, not in theory, but in timelines. By the time you're chasing your third $20,000, the gap shrinks again. Your contribution stays the same, but your money starts doing more of the work. At higher levels, the acceleration looks almost absurd. Once a portfolio reaches around $400,000, generating another $20,000 can take as little as 5 months. The same milestone that once required nearly 2 years of discipline now happens automatically, without extra effort. That's why the first $20,000 feels brutal, and why everything after it feels lighter. Some people assume this happens because wealthy investors get access to secret opportunities or exclusive investments. At the extreme high end, sure, there are differences, but that's not what's driving this effect. The real reason is far less exciting and far more powerful. It's just math. A 10% return on $1,000 gives you $100. The same 10% return on $10,000 gives you $1,000. Same rate, same risk, same time frame. The only thing that changed was the size of the base. And that's why the first $20,000 matters more than almost anything else in personal finance. This is why $20,000 feels like such a real turning point. Before that level, investment returns barely register. The math works, but the impact doesn't. A 10% gain on $2,000 is $200. That's fine, but it doesn't change your life, your options, or your stress level. Now run the same math on $20,000. A 10% return is $2,000. That's no longer theoretical. That's rent, travel, debt reduction, or additional investing. At an 8% annual return, $20,000 produces about $1,600 a year without you doing anything. No extra hours, no side hustle, no boss involved. That money exists solely because your capital is working for you. And here's the key point most people misunderstand. The strategy didn't get smarter. Someone with $1,000 can use the exact same index funds, the same broker, the same asset allocation. There's no secret playbook unlocked at $20,000. The difference is scale. And scale turns small percentage gains into meaningful progress. But this next part matters more than the math. When you save $20,000, you've done something far more important than building a pile of cash. You've built the single most valuable financial habit you'll ever have. Saving that amount from zero isn't accidental. Unless you're earning extreme income or living rent-free, it requires discipline. You had to track spending. You had to say no to things you wanted. You had to ignore impulse purchases and stay consistent month after month. And that's the real win. You proved to yourself that you control your money, not the other way around. You became someone who can delay gratification when it actually matters. That's not just a money skill, that's a life skill. Once that identity shift happens, everything downstream changes. Before $20,000, even small purchases can create anxiety. A coffee, a dinner out, everything feels like a trade-off. After $20,000, you stop obsessing over small decisions because you've already proven you can handle the big ones. There's another psychological shift at this level that almost no one talks about. You stop seeing the world as a series of threats. When you're living paycheck to paycheck, every surprise is a crisis. A car repair can wreck your month. A broken laptop becomes a problem you can't afford. A rent increase feels like an attack. With $20,000 in reserves, those same events lose their power. A car repair is annoying, not disastrous. A dead laptop becomes an upgrade decision. Higher rent becomes a signal to negotiate, relocate, or increase income. And more importantly, you start noticing opportunities that were always there, but invisible when you were stressed, broke, and reacting. That's when money stops feeling fragile and starts feeling usable. This is where things start to show up in real life. A friend mentions they're starting a business and might be looking for investors. In the past, you would have nodded, thought interesting, and moved on. Now, you can actually evaluate whether putting $5,000 into it makes sense. A rental property shows up online at a discount because it needs work. Before, you would have scrolled past it and felt a quiet mix of envy and frustration. Now, you can run the numbers and decide if it's a real opportunity or a bad deal. Your manager mentions a conference in another city that could help your career, but the company won't cover it. Before, you'd automatically rule it out. Now, you can look at it the right way: cost versus potential return. This is what people really mean when they say money attracts money. It's not mystical, it's not luck, it's not the universe playing favorites. Having money gives you options, and options expose you to more opportunities to earn, learn, and compound. There's another shift that happens around the $20,000 mark that completely rewires how you think about budgeting. You stop obsessing over small expenses and start focusing on the big ones. That sounds backward until you experience it. When you're broke, every purchase feels important. Name brand versus generic, coffee out versus coffee at home, regular gas or premium, each decision feels heavy because every dollar matters. Once you have a real financial buffer, you realize most of those micro choices barely move the needle. Even something like daily coffee might cost you $1,000 a year if you're extreme about it. That's not nothing, but it's not what determines your financial future either. The decisions that actually matter are structural: where you live, what you drive, how much you save, and how you invest. Those choices can swing your net worth by tens of thousands or more over time. So instead of debating organic bananas, you start optimizing housing costs, increasing income, and tightening your investment strategy. That shift is freeing. You stop wasting mental energy on noise and start thinking strategically. Now let's talk about what happens to your career when you hit this milestone, because this is where the leverage really shows up. Having $20,000 saved doesn't just change how you view money, it changes how you relate to work. When you're living paycheck to paycheck, you're trapped. The job might be miserable, the boss might be toxic, the work might be draining, but you stay because you can't afford not to. That puts you in a weak position. You can't negotiate, you can't push back, you can't risk looking elsewhere. Everyone can feel that dependency, even if no one says it out loud. But $20,000 changes the power dynamic. Now you have what I call walking away money. You could leave tomorrow and still cover your expenses while you look for something better. That doesn't mean you quit impulsively, but it means you're no longer negotiating from fear. That psychological shift shows up everywhere. You ask for the raise because rejection won't destroy you. You push back on unreasonable demands because the downside is survivable. You explore better opportunities because you can afford uncertainty. And this is where things start getting really interesting. Most of the time, you never even have to use your walking away money. Just knowing it exists changes how you show up. You're calmer, more direct, more willing to take on difficult projects instead of playing it safe. And when you operate that way, people notice. You start getting better assignments, more responsibility, more visibility, and eventually, more pay. It's like having a safety net you hope you'll never need, but its presence changes how you move. And the best part is that confidence feeds back into wealth building. As your career improves, your savings grow faster, which gives you even more options. It's a loop, and once it starts, it tends to accelerate. Now, this is where a lot of people sabotage themselves. They reach $20,000, feel that sense of relief, and then immediately spend it. A new car because they earned it, an expensive vacation to celebrate, a house payment they're not actually ready for. Don't do that. That $20,000 isn't a trophy, it's the foundation. It's the seed that compounds into real freedom if you leave it alone long enough. Here's a hard truth that makes people uncomfortable. The average person will spend more on cars over their lifetime than it would take to become financially independent. Between payments, insurance, maintenance, and fuel, many people burn $600 to $800 a month just to get around. Over 40 years, that's easily $400,000 or more,
while claiming they can't afford to save or invest. That's not a math problem, that's a priorities problem. And it gets worse. The moment a new car leaves the dealership, it loses roughly 20% of its value. You're not just spending money, you're converting it into something that actively destroys wealth. Compare that with investing the same amount into a diversified portfolio. One choice shrinks over time, the other compounds. Now, to be fair, cars are emotional. People want reliability, comfort, something that feels like success. That's fine, as long as you're honest about the trade-off. A car payment might make you feel rich, but it's often the reason you're not. This is where having $20,000 saved completely changes how you evaluate big purchases. You stop asking, can I afford the monthly payment, and start asking, what is this really costing me? That $30,000 car isn't just $30,000, it's $30,000 that could turn into $200,000 over 20 years if invested instead. When you see it that way, driving a reliable used car stops feeling like deprivation. It feels like a strategic decision that's funding your future freedom. Here's the irony most people miss. The person in the brand new luxury car is often stressed about money, while the person driving an older Honda is quietly building wealth and sleeping better at night. This mindset spreads to every major decision: housing, education, travel, hobbies. Not in a joy-killing, obsessive way, but in a deliberate one. You start making intentional choices instead of letting money leak away.
And something surprising happens once you think this way. You realize you don't actually want half the things you thought you did. A bigger apartment might be nice, but is it worth pushing financial independence back 5 years? That expensive hobby might be fun, but are there cheaper ways to get the same satisfaction? This isn't about becoming cheap or miserable. It's about aligning your spending with what actually matters to you. When you have clear goals and understand how compounding works, it becomes much easier to separate impulse from intention. $20,000 won't make you rich overnight, but it will change how you think, how you decide, and how you move through the world. It's the difference between reacting to life and designing it. Start building that foundation now. Your future self is counting on the choices you make today, and trust me, they'll be glad you did.